Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman and we're back. Now I know I said I probably wouldn't do another video today, but I kind of wanted to show off the process I use to make the object models for the items in Minecraft. Now normally when you make stuff for the newer versions of Minecraft, especially after 1.7, you would use either just a flat item model or some kind of block model that's a composition of smaller blocks to make it look like something. A great example is the actual Editions furnace that looks like it's comprised of a series of smaller blocks made to give it a three-dimensional shape. However, for ICBM, we originally, when we created it, we used techne models. That was something that was used like way back and kind of went out of phase. Eventually, we converted to .object models for the other mods. So the newer ICBM uses .object models, things like assembly line uses .object models, stuff like that. So I'm going to show the process we use to convert the techne models to the .object models to get them updated, because we can't just take a techne model and use it for the item renderer. I mean, there is ways to do it, but it's a very backwards path to make it work, and then it doesn't leave a lot of room for resource pack makers to come in and change things. Although with the fact we're still using techne models for the actual block renders, it's kind of a moot point, but we'll get there eventually where all the blocks will also be .object models. That way somebody can come in if they want to, and they can switch it out to be a solid block. They can switch it out to be a block similar to this where it's got multiple compositions, or they can continue to use .object models or whatever you want to use. The fact is, if somebody brings in another importer for, like, say, Collada, does the other model formats, I actually don't know many model formats outside of Collada and .object, but here, let's get the process. So first thing, in order to actually convert these, you need a piece of software to do this. There are plugins for Blender to do this, where you can import techne models and export techne models, but I couldn't find the plugins because they're pretty dated and everybody just stopped using techne at some point. So there's a piece of software called TCN2, which is recommended to several guys. This is one guide I found a while back, and I figured I would just show it so you guys can find the download link. You click that, and it will download. Actually, that is not what I'm looking for. Well, actually, yeah, that is what I'm looking for. I didn't use this site to download it last time, so I'm a little confused. But you download this, it should be fine. Double check the source though, just in case I'm wrong. Make sure it's not a virus or anything. So to actually do the process, we go ahead and show how this works. So we're going to go find the model folder here. Go here. That is not the folder I wanted to find. This is what I get for not scripting these videos. So actually, yeah, it's Google Drive, then work folder, Minecraft, quests, models, ICBM Classic, and there we go, techne update. So this is the current folder I'm working in to update all the models. I'm basically almost done at this point. I've got 2 tiers of launchers to do and a couple other machines left. There's, I believe I still have to do the mine, missile console, and I have to do the updated radar, which for those who remember the old mod, this is the updated radar, or the old radar is what I meant to say. So let's go back to the folder. So we're going to do the tier 2 launcher. Now I've already gone through and actually converted this, but I'm going to go ahead and actually delete all these and show you how the process works. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my file here. So I've already had this in here. I've already been running it. I just literally copy and paste it into a folder. How this works is it will convert all the techne models in the folder with it. So I'm going to run Google Drive here. So you double click it, and it'll then go through and it'll convert each file one by one. It doesn't do a perfect job. This is the reason why I have to import these in the Blender, fix the everything that goes along with it, because these will only create your .object models. You won't create the material files. The material files are needed actually to make the models work, and then we can go ahead and delete this. So if we actually open these up, they don't have a material file, so they won't render with textures, but for the most part. So if we take a look at this, it's the tier 2 launcher frame, and when we open up, is that the file name? Rail is what this is called. Make sure I'm opening the wrong file. Just ignore that. I don't know why Google Drive actually asks every single time I do something. So look at this. So this one actually does have a texture with it and techne. So there was a texture, but the software that was made did not know how to convert it. Let's go ahead and move this, and we can actually get a comparison. So the geometry is correct. So there's nothing wrong with the geometry. It looks perfectly fine. And this will be what we'll end up actually importing, although I think we're going to actually ignore a few of these. So I don't need all these techne models. I believe the only ones I actually need are this one. Nope, not that one. So I need the support frame, which that one actually has pieces with it. The other ones don't, which is kind of weird. Here's the actual frame piece. We actually aren't going to convert that one. I believe it's the rails is what I want. No? Really? Yeah, this is one of the ones that's going to take a bit longer to convert, so we'll go ahead and down screen this, and we'll go ahead and get Blender open. So the next process to get this going, in order to actually convert a model, you're going to need some kind of software. So with this only created the basic geometry, and if we actually open this up, you can actually open these up with Notepad. It creates a basically series of things, and it doesn't define the material that you're supposed to be using. At least I don't think it does. So you go through here, you won't see a material definition, and if we go and we compare an updated one, so if we go and we find like this one, this is the material file I'm talking about. It actually defines some basic properties, but more importantly, it tells you what the texture you're going to use. That's what Minecraft's going to look for, or rather Forge, because Minecraft doesn't do objects by itself, and it's going to actually tell it wants that file. And if we actually go into this here and edit it, there will probably be a definition here. Yes, it looks for that material file, and then it tells it, okay, this is the material it's going to use per piece of geometry. So if you scroll down again, it goes, hey, this is the piece of geometry or material we're going to use for that geometry, and so on and so on. And you come over to this one, and it doesn't have that. You don't see a material definition. So this will not load a texture no matter how hard you try. You would have to go through a backwards way to do it, like assign a texture manually, and etc. So that doesn't work for us because of the JSON system, as far as I've been told. Now, I could be wrong on this because, of course, there are some people that probably have found a way around it, that you can't assign a texture through the JSON model system, which is what we actually want to use. So let's go ahead and close these down. We'll come back to this later. But we get Blender open. I've got a basic setup. I think I'm even running an older version. It doesn't really matter what version you're running, because the only thing you really are looking to do with this is assign the material and just export it, so it's all exported properly. So let's go ahead and start by importing. So we're going to want to import a .wave object, and we're going to have to find it, so we'll have to go navigate here for a second. So we want to do the launcher here, and we just left everything in the basic folder, so we didn't move everything in folders and stuff. So we got the main platform is what we want to start by importing. So this gives us our center point for our block, and of course it's a little off-centered, or a little off the bottom here. You could fix this if you want by simply just dragging it up and down. I'm going to not do that, so that way I can get all my pieces together first. And of course, when we import it, actually it's going to get a number of shapes. So we got the bottom piece, both side pieces, and of course these are not named properly. I think it's actually what they're named in the techne file, because the people we had who worked on the models just didn't name things for whatever reason. That or the program also, and of course I hit the wrong button. I'm still not accustomed to Blender, so don't depend on me as an expert for Blender here. So we're going to import our next piece here and get all our pieces together. So what we're looking to do with the launcher here is we want to get all the pieces put together. So right now we've got that piece. This piece is going to be a little more complicated. So let's actually Control Z first. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to drag all of the pieces together and name them real quick. And we're going to call this the base. That way I can find this stuff, because we're going to be dealing with 3 pieces, potentially more, in order to get this put together. Unfortunately, because this model was not actually predefined. So we're going to import the next piece, and we're going to put the rail. And then we're going to take and we're going to drag all of the pieces. So we're going to find whatever one's the most bottom piece. You don't have to do it this way. Actually, can we center this thing? Okay, so that's got 0 on all the geometry pieces, so what I'm going to actually do is just drag this to the side. That way it's not in my way, and what I can do is just come back through later and hit 0 and hit enter, and it'll go back. So put that right there. And what we're looking for, actually, we can just click it. So it's shape piece 15. We're going to call this rail, and we'll call it rail A. And then we're going to literally sit here and drag all the pieces on, so that way I can find where all my rail pieces are and do everything. And we're probably not even going to bother importing the other rail, because I believe they're both the same rail, just one is rotated in another direction. And since we don't need to worry about rotation, we can actually sit here and just copy it real quick and then rotate the other one. Let's go ahead and drag this off to the side, and then we're going to take this piece with the base here, and we're going to reset it so we know where our center is. And while we're in here, we're going to use this as our basically our model real quick, to make sure that we actually are building this exactly the way it looks in game, so that way when somebody picks it up and puts it in their inventory, the item that they see in their GUI here or in their hand looks identical to that. It doesn't have to be perfect, because we really are going to just use this object model for the item at the moment, and then we'll come back through here later and redo this. Another important thing when you're using Blender, make sure you do save. It does have a tendency to crash every so often. It's not horrible on the crashing. It has improved a lot over the years I've used it. I started using Blender think the first time I used it was like back at like 2005 or 8, somewhere around there. And I made a couple small models, and then I didn't touch it again for like multiple years. That's the reason I don't know how to use it anymore, is I haven't used it in a long time. So we're just going to call this launcher. And launcher tier 2. That way the files, whatever you say the Blender file is, you want to make sure that matches, so that way it's real easy when you go to export. So when you hit file, export, .object, then it will automatically populate the name. If you don't do that, you'll type the name in every single time. So we're going to hit cancel because we don't want to export just yet. But we do want to sit here and make sure these are all rotated. So looking at this piece, I think we just need to rotate this by like 90 degrees. So it just it touches the side here. So it looks like how this is built is it just meant to be right there next to the side. And we're also going to do a couple other tricks here to make sure that this is easier. The first trick that I figured out while working with this, and this is probably not the most advised way, is you can create some empty cubes. And then you can sit here with the empty cube. And you want to set the scale to 0.5. That way it's exactly 1 meter in size in all shapes, because that scale is 0.5 from the center. So it's 0.5 out to each edge, and then that'll give you an exact size block. And we'll go ahead and we'll position this so it's 0, 0'd. We could just leave it this way, and that would tell me that that's an exact block, but what we can also do is set the Y position to -0.5. And that'll be right at the bottom. And you could imagine that's like, say that's the block you're sitting on top of. And this is how I know a lot of these models are a little messed up. And that could be the export script or export jar we were using, or it could be anything. Another thing with this one is what you can go ahead and do is you can duplicate it hitting Control. Actually, that didn't work. So there's a way to duplicate these. Control C and then Control V. There we go. So you can go ahead and duplicate these and then make multiples of them. And then you can click this one, of course, and you can say, okay, I want this to be 1 block over. And that'll tell you the exact spacing. And we're going to go ahead and do that a couple times here. So we're going to hit another Control V, and then we're going to set this one to -1. Make sure I actually grab the right one. Whatever box you have selected, by the way, in Blender, is the one that will show up down here in this tab down here. So we'll do -1, so we get an exact. So we know that's exactly 3 blocks wide, so we can make sure we position all of our objects so that way when we actually end up switching to the dot object for the blocks, they're perfectly positioned. But of course we're doing this for items, so we don't really care. And of course save every so often as well. So let's grab our rail, and we want to pretty much just rotate this. It actually looks like it's already been rotated. No, it's been rotated up 90 degrees. This is one of the big problems about importing models from .techne, is that it's been rotated. And I really wish it wasn't, because that's going to make our lives harder. And I believe we just want to rotate this by 90 degrees. And that's why I said it's going to be harder. Let's try Z-axis. Okay, so that's right. Now I'm remembering it, Blender has the Z and the Y-axis switched. So if the blue arrow here is our Z, which is up and down, Y is going to be our left and right here, and X is going to be coming towards us, which is, it doesn't matter perspective. Of course, I'll hit the number keys to switch that. And let's go back to here. So that looks like it's going to be correct. I don't know what axis is considered front or back in here, so you're going to have to just experiment to figure that out. So we're going to want to make sure this is basically right there. And it looks like we can just set that to 1 is what that's going to be. So that gets our first half. And of course, we just sit here and we just duplicate the object. So see if it'll let me duplicate the whole thing. I think I'm going to have to like select the whole hierarchy. So we'll select hierarchy, Control C, Control V. It's still not working. I know there's a way to do this. Control C, copy to buffer, Control V. There we go. Yeah, sometimes it can be finicky with the hotkeys. What we want to do with this, we just want to say, like, maybe -90. Yeah, that'll work. And of course, -1. So there we go. We get our launcher. It's now set up, and it looks basically the same. So if we pop in over here, all looks good. All the positioning data looks about the same. And cool, because then we didn't actually have to import both models. So we're actually going to pop back out here just really quick, just to make sure that the 2 different rails that are here are literally just rotated rails. So if we pop that one, so this is the rails one with the S, and then here's the rail file with just the normal, and they are literally the same file. And I don't see really any difference between them. So I don't know why they were exported. Maybe they're just different named versions of each other, which is confusing, but okay. But that's all the pieces though. So now the last step is we just want to assign the material. Now the way I figured out how to do materials is you just pick one piece, assign the material, then you hit Control A, or no, you don't have Control A, you just hit A, so and that will select everything. Then you hit Control L, and then hit materials, and that will assign the material to all of the actual files, so you don't have to go through individually and do each material individually. It saves huge amounts of time, which is a great lifesaver. And of course, while we're also at this really quick, before we actually assign the texture, let's actually fix this here. See if I get the right perspective before I sit here and mess with stuff. You can hit the number keys, by the way, to change perspective, and one of these keys will give me the Y. Right here it is. So I've got everything selected right now, and I'm going to deselect. You can do this with the shift key. Deselect my 3 cubes, and I have everything else selected, and I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. It's going to be a bit slow because Blender has to move all of the objects. And we're just going to pull it up until it's not quite above the line, because we want a little bit of this to stick into the ground, because it does make it so that way there is not a spacer between the ground and your block. And there we go, that's lined up everything. And now to do the texture, you just come over here, you select, of course, one of the blocks, and what you want to do is make sure we actually have material assigned. So we got the material, and there's actually, yeah, right there we go. I was amazed because there was supposed to be a normal texture already assigned by default, and it's empty. You want to delete that, just click new, then scroll down, hit open, and you want to find your texture. It doesn't really matter what texture you actually assign to it, because you're going to have to change the texture location to fix the way Minecraft does things. So for here, we're just literally assigning it just so we can see what it looks like in game. And of course, you need to switch to material mode or render mode to actually see it. And of course, Blender doesn't like the small texture sizes, so it's got a bit of scaling. There is probably a way you can come down into the texture sheet and say, okay, don't do this to it, don't do that to it, and fix all the different problems, but it doesn't matter because we don't really need that. Anyway, save, of course. And then we're going to go ahead and hit export. And we'll export this as .object, and we'll just dump it right into the folder here, because we didn't actually make separate folders. When you're doing this, by the way, one of the real recommendations I can give you is to start making folders like this. So call a folder TNC, then sit here and dump like all of your stuff in here. That way you don't get lost. And of course you can dump your texture in there. So apparently there was actually a texture in the base folder I could have used. You want to go ahead and actually dump, like, say, like object stage 1. So I call this stage 1 because these are the objects that have yet to be converted. You can take all those and not open them, because that's not the key I wanted to hit. Dump those all in a folder. That makes it cleaner, so you know what each of the folders are, and you can kind of navigate much quicker. And of course you can make a folder for the Blender. I'm not going to do that. You can make a folder for your output. I'm also not going to do that because I'll do that later. But we have our texture, but we have to come in here. So what this actually will do, when it does actually assign your texture, it'll make this big long length file, which will only work on your computer, and you have to then match the Minecraft version. So where I said we'll probably come back to the other launcher real quick, is I'm literally just going to come into the other launcher and copy this out real quick, and then do this, because that'll save a bit of time. You also want to remove the PNG off the back, because for whatever reason the Forge import system puts a PNG at the end of it and doesn't detect for an existing PNG. It's something that I think really should be fixed. But yes, that's how you do that. So that's now a functional model. We can now take this. We'll not take that one. We have to go back up a folder, go to this one, and we can now take this one, copy it, and then go find where we have our actual mod files. So of course I have this in 112, ICBM Classic source, main, resources, assets, ICBM Classic, models, items. Now for whatever reason, I have to stick these in the model folder, the item folder. I don't know why, but it works, so I don't question it. I'll probably come through and actually probably ask a whole bunch of questions here later in the modding Discord and figure out why exactly this is done this way, and if there's a way around it. But for the moment, this is the way it's done, and it works. So we've got these in here. We can actually close Blender now because we're done with it. And what we have to do is just, I don't even know if we have to reload Minecraft, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways because Minecraft doesn't take that long to load. And we just need to set up some variants and stuff. So a few different ways to do this, but we're going to only do one way because that's the way I'm going to show how it's done. And we need to just set up so we can do the block variant state, but what I'm just probably going to do, since I'm going to have to scale this differently anyways, is I think I'm just going to go define another launcher base here. So we're going to do this real quick, and we're just going to call this launcher base tier 2. And then we want to register our machine a second time here. So this is how you register your model. I've got a helper method for this. I'll show what it does. And we'll make sure, okay, it's meta value 1. And I believe we can put a suffix on this. Yeah, so we can put a suffix to saying it's the tier version. So this is actually the call you would actually make. You're going to set a custom model location, use basically the item you're going to actually register. The metadata the item is actually going to be in. So you can actually register different metadata. So you can say, okay, I want my metadata 0 item to be at this location, and so on and so on. Then the recommended way is to use the block registry name, which will actually assign it to the package of ICBM Classic. And then it will look in the block state, or look in, of course, the items folder if it's actually going to be an item. The thing is, we could actually probably get away with the default Minecraft item system. And of course, I got a suffix system on here, and of course the variant as well. So what we could actually do if we were doing the normal block state system is I could actually come into the launcher and I could put variants down here. I'm not going to do that right now because it's a little bit more complex to do, and we just want to do a really quick example. So we're going to use my suffix here, and we're just going to, in the back of this, we're just going to attach, and we set it to tier 2. So that will just attach tier 2 to the end of this, and then it'll point at this file, and this file we're just going to tell it to look for the model we just dragged in there. And that would be the underscore tier and then underscore 2. And that'll assign everything, and that'll work. And the only thing I have to do is then come in here and use the values I already have in here and scale it and make sure it moves around and everything else. And we'll go ahead and do that. It's a bit of a lengthy process. This is why it takes a bit longer to do all of the models and everything. And I've kind of got used to it, so I'm a little bit faster. When I first did this, it took me a couple hours to figure it out, as I had to come in here and go, okay, what is this? Because it doesn't tell you what this is. I really wish that they took the same system they did for rotation and they used it for translations, because we have an X, Y, and Z for rotation. But you come down to translation, we're just using a flat array. And it doesn't say, okay, is this the X axis you're using? Is it the Y and Z? And this is actually, of course, X, Y, and Z is what these actually are. They're relative speaking, because once you rotate it, it's no longer in the X direction, but it's the X relative to the object itself. So, of course, if you were doing an inventory, which is the GUI right here, this will go left to right on your screen, and this will go up and down, unless you mess with a whole bunch of rotations, and of course it may be a little bit more tricky, but generally that's how it works out. Occasionally I've had to mess with the Z-axis to get things to move properly, and of course they're scaled a lot too. We're probably going to actually have to decrease the scale even further, because the tier 2 launcher I think is slightly bigger than the tier 1, and of course when we ever do the tier 3, this scale is probably going to be even smaller. It's actually made me think that I might want to come back in here and just do 2D textures for the launchers, because it'll be a more descriptive visual than it would be otherwise. Although I still do want to do 3D models in the hand, and I've been told that's not exactly simple to do, so we may have to do a little bit of tomfoolery to get that to work. Of course, I gotta tell my JSON system to load. I haven't yet to update the JSON loader for 1.12. So we're still using the, I believe, version 2 version, and then the 1.7 version is using the version 3 for my JSON loader. Not that they're properly version numbered, but that's basically what it comes down to. Okay, so now we're in here, and I forgot one important step, but hopefully we can fix this without having to relaunch. For whatever reason, the textures get flipped. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to come in here, find the model texture, take this, copy it, and we'll actually just need to rename this. And we're just going to do something like that because that's pretty easy to do. And we then need to come in here and edit this. And we need to flip it. So for whatever reason, I think it's something wrong with the Blender export, something with it, the texture gets flipped. I have yet to figure out what's up with it, but the simplest solution is to go ahead and just flip your texture, because it takes probably longer to fix the problem than it is just to do a simple adjustment. Plus, we're probably going to be switching to the object models anyway, so we'll end up actually just probably using these ones and deleting the old ones. So that's flipped, and then we have to go into our actual model file, which we can edit these directly in here. And we just have to tell it we want to switch over to launcher base tier 2 for our texture. This is how simple it is to switch textures. If you ever want to switch textures after you made the model, you can do it this way. How to do it actually in code if you ever want to switch between textures, I have yet to look at that. I probably will figure it out later, as we do have the radar station, which does have flipping textures. Let's go ahead and hit F. Actually, hold on. We want to do reload real quick, which for me is Alt-R. That's not a default hotkey in IntelliJ, so you have to figure it out yourself. And then we want to do F3T to reload resources and hope that it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to relaunch Minecraft. It does take a while to do the F3T. F3T, by the way, reloads resources, and it's a debug dev feature. It's really nice if you want to sit there and work on your JSON models and everything. It's a great way to do it. I don't know if it actually reloads resources itself, like the actual object models. Hopefully it does, or we'll have to relaunch. It doesn't look like it is, so we'll have to go ahead and relaunch. That's not too big of a deal, because I think relaunch is about the same time as that resource reload. Relatively speaking, of course, because it's not exactly the same time, but if it's anything less than my 1.7 workspace, my 1.7 workspace some days can be like somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes of load time. If I can avoid reloading that, I will avoid reloading that. It takes even longer when I throw some, like, if I throw some like IC2 in there, it goes up by 4 minutes. I threw GregTech in there one day, it took 20 minutes. I think it's mainly because GregTech has a huge amount of ore textures. It takes a while for those to load up and register and everything. There is something fundamentally wrong with Minecraft when I think about it, when it takes this long to reload resources, because I have played games that have under 1 second load time. There's like a really cool game I was playing. I actually wouldn't call it cool. It's pretty old school, but when you click the launch button in Steam, the game instantaneously loads. Like you're on the main menu as soon as you click launch, and I have yet to find a game that does that. I have to go hunt down the game again in my Steam library and just show it off, just so I can show this example. But it is an older school game, so that's probably why. But it does have 3D models and stuff in it, so there is loading there. So whatever Minecraft has done, it just takes longer to load. It could be the Stitch event where it puts all the texture together, and it would be something that I would have to sit there and research and figure out why it is it's doing it. And there are probably people smarter than me, like Master Fry, who does a lot of the texture renders, that does understand what's up. Okay, so that's not working, so we must something up. And we can look at the console to figure this out. Ignore the multi-block structure stuff. That's all the multi-block structure trying to load. There's some packet issues. A lot of packet issues, actually. That is amazing. You're not even supposed to be able to get a packet that has a null player. Scroll up. Yeah, this is the reason why I say that you definitely want to wait for a while until I get the ICBM stabilized before using it. But back to this tutorial here. So it could not find variance. It's couldn't find variance for a couple things. Error loading model for variant, yada yada. It's trying to load the block models and they don't exist. And we're just trying to register an item model. No, we can go with plan B. So plan B is we're going to just go ahead and delete this guy, and we're going to set it up to use the other system. So I do have another system for registering stuff that is a little bit more simplistic. Let's see if I can figure it out real quick. And I think we're just going to probably copy one of these. Yeah, we'll copy this one. So there's a way you can pretty much point your item renders at your block state system, and it's a much easier. So we're going to do register launcher base. We'll probably do this for the screen as well later. So we get a resource path, and of course we need to make sure this actually is the correct block. So this will be block launcher base. And we'll set a custom state mapper. Make sure it actually does its thing correctly. Get property. And then we want to go through the tier system. So it'll be enum tier. And we actually want to make sure this only does a set number. So we're actually going to make a new array here. Actually, new enum tier. Yeah, do it that way. I was about to do it the wrong way because I've been programming in a few other languages recently again, so my brain is a little confused on the patterns. For those who are new to programming, I don't recommend trying to learn multiple languages at once. It will mess you up. So that'll get us all the tiers that we actually support, because there's also a tier 4 in the enum list, and of course we don't actually have a tier 4 launcher, so it will actually cause errors. And then we want to make sure that we actually create the block states we're looking for. So we only need the rotation thing. So we're going to do, not rotation, tier. So this would be, it should be a prop tier. ICBM Classic, we want block ICBM. Tier property. And then we just want to pass in the tier here, so that'll give us our correct block state. And then we have a system that was given to us by the coded one to do actual conversions to a string, and then this will pass it into the string resource down here, which will actually give us the correct system. And then we want to do tier.ordinal, which will register to the metadata value, but then it will point us at our variance, so we can set up our variance and everything. So that looks good. Now we just need to come up here and replace our actual registry call, which is right here, with this method call, and that should work. But then we do have to come in here and we do have to set up variance properly. So we'll have a tier variant, and we can ignore the inventory variant here. And then this will be replaced with a tier. I actually think we can actually completely remove that. I don't think we need it anymore. Let me just double check with one of the other blocks. So we do have pressure plate. So yeah, this is, we don't actually, well, I guess we can have an inventory one here. And then what we do is we'll be creating something like this system right here. So we'll have to come over, close a few files here so I stop tabbing to other things. And then we'll have to do each of our tiers. So our tiers should be lowercase, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go find that tab again and double check our tier data. So this should be serializable. Yeah, so if you ever do an enum, by the way, you need a serializable to actually use it. And this will create a method called getName, and that will actually do the name to lowercase is what I've got set up to. So it'll take this object right here and it will give me that as lowercase. So then we have 1, 2, and 3, so that's good. That makes life easier. And what we literally are just going to do is just assign a model to each one of these. We don't even need to do anything with translations unless you really want to, although I probably will come back through here and actually mess with translations later because it does take a while. And the thing I'm probably going to just have to do is mess with the GUI scale. So tier 1, and of course tier 1 is just going to be set to this model. We'll go ahead and just copy this in each one, and we double check with what I was using as an example. Yeah, so you just called a model there. In this case, we just set it to this, and then this one will be tier 2. And of course, we don't have a tier 3, but we'll leave it as that model that we have. We actually have a render that looks nice, and we'll come back in later and just set that to tier 3 later. And that should be all that we need to do. And let's go ahead and run it, and it should launch up. Actually been a longer tutorial than I was planning. I'll probably have to make another one of these later that's much shorter. The original reason for doing this is just a couple people wanted to know how you did this process, both from a technical point of view and from a why is it taking so long to update ICBM Classic view. Models actually have taken a majority of the time. Like the code itself took me a couple weeks, mainly just because I had a small cold. But then the models, they take the longest because you have to just sit here and keep toying with them and toying with them until they eventually line up. But almost done. Go ahead and close this. Eventually I'll have to come through and probably have to fix that JSON system, but that's a video for another day. Literally that error that pops up that says, do you want to continue, is because NEI is not installed. That's literally why that pops up. We have we used to have handlers for NEI that would go, hey, I want to hide an item, but because NEI doesn't actually exist in the same context as it did in 1.7, I then have to make a JEI proxy for that. No, we broke everything. No, we didn't break. Well, that's still rendering as nothing. Let me go grab another Yeah, let's just clear my inventory and grab another item, just to make sure there isn't any problem with that. So we're working on the launcher bases. Separate this out, make sure I actually have... Okay, so I need to switch spots with these. So that's tier 1, 2, and 3, and they're all not rendering properly. So what did we mess up? Of course, we gotta dig through all the basic packet errors and scroll up to here until we can figure out what's up. It's probably going to try to get the rotation value, so I think we're going to have to add the rotation in here, and we can just copy that really quickly from the explosives. And that just has a simple rotation system down here, and I think I'll just leave that as is. I think I've been told that that is about that'll work for most of my models. And we just need to pop that down here so that way the forge system generates the states properly. And that looks proper, at least what we're looking for. So yeah, we have all the variants, have the model, have the textures. And this should be set up properly too. I think we can just reload this one. Now if that doesn't work, then we have to check how we registered the states and make sure they're registered properly. Okay, I didn't change anything. So it is probably a system with the states not being registered, and I think I know exactly what's wrong with it. So with the explosive block, when we actually state the property we are looking for, we set a rotation value for it. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Because rotation.up doesn't have any actual rotation applied to it, I think we can just go ahead and do the same exact thing to this. So we got our tier property, and then we got our rotation property. And that's the same thing you see up here. We got our explosive property, and then we got our rotation property. And that should work. If that doesn't work, then, well, have to probably toy with it more. I think we're good on this, so we just have to relaunch. I probably should have exited gracefully rather than hitting the exit button, because now we're going to probably have to throw those items back in our inventory again. It's the fun part about all the textures and resource systems, and most of you probably won't even know that watches this will go like, why I'm probably complaining about this, but in 1.7 we didn't have to do any of this, and then once you go to the newer versions you have to sit here and like actually register all your models and then toy with your models and then mess with them again and everything else. In 1.7 you just went, okay, I want to render an item, load my model, assign the texture, then rotate it, and then render it, and you were done. You didn't have to tell Minecraft, hey, I need to make sure that you load stuff. Because even with Minecraft, you go, okay, if I want to load objects, I have to tell it to actually load the objects at the top. Then I have to literally wait for an event call, which is actually called from the main system, and then get and register all my models after all my blocks and stuff have been done. That's just registering. That's not even setting them up and making sure they're done right and making sure all the states translate. It is much more complicated, although I do like the data system that Minecraft has been moving towards. Games should be data driven, is because then you're not writing code every time you want to do something. You can then go, okay, I know what this code already does, and I can just go, hey, I want to make a new texture for it or make a new model for it. And then you're separating completely out all the stuff rendered from it. And it's still not working. So let's go ahead and look at the crash areas again. So that's where it's looking for launch screens. More launch screen stuff, launch frames. So I'm not actually seeing... I'm not seeing launcher base in here, so what did we mess up? Let's get that, so we don't actually need that for now. So we have launcher base, we're assigning the models, yet we're getting... We're not even getting a missing I'm missing model location. It's just flat out not doing stuff. Like when you're missing the actual variant data, and we can show this example here, like grab one of these items down here. Well, it should actually. It's supposed to actually show like what the actual variant ID and everything is. So maybe it's not registering properly at all. So when we call this, we call register launcher base. This will then get the launcher base here. Launcher base. Ah, this is because we've assigned it to the block explosive. Let's actually see. Yeah. Well, we know it works. It's just rendering as the wrong block. This is what happens when you copy and paste things. Number one warning there. Well, at least we know that the render works properly and the tier 2 renders properly. That's the wrong rotation though, which is weird, and that probably has to do with how I exported the object model. I'll have to go ahead and compare how everything looks, and I might have to ask a few questions, but I'm going to go ahead and end the video there because we know at least the renders work. I just assigned them to the wrong block. So I'll see you guys later and probably come back with a better video version of this at another time. Don't hold me to that though, because I've said that before and I've completely forgotten to make tutorials for other things.